The scanner flashed a warning no one had ever seen before. Subject bears marks of divine defiance, classification, God Slayer. Commander Thinney stared at the readout, then at the human standing casually in his medical bay. Dante shrugged, as if his back wasn't covered in scars that defied cosmic logic. This wasn't just another damaged freighter docking at Omega Prime. The station's protocols were designed for smugglers and refugees. Not whatever this was. The real question wasn't whether Dante was lying about his cargo. It was whether the station could survive whatever truth he was carrying. The Defiant Spirit's docking records didn't just contain inconsistencies, they contained mathematical impossibilities. Omega Prime's log showed this same freighter had been completely vaporized on 6 separate occasions across 3 different sectors. Once by antimatter charges in the Balthar system, twice during supernova shockwaves near Krellis Station. 3 more times during what station archives only listed as celestial anomalies. Yet here it sat in Docking Bay 47, hull-scorched but structurally sound, like a punchline that refused to acknowledge its own joke. Engineering teams found burn patterns across the ship's thrusters that matched 6 distinct wreckage sites. The particle residue told contradictory stories. One thruster nozzle showed carbon scoring from exposure to a neutron star's accretion disk, while the adjacent thruster bore the distinctive ion burns of a plasma storm in the Rigel system. These events occurred light years apart at the exact same timestamp according to the ship's own drive logs. The technicians ran the calculations 3 times before realizing the numbers weren't wrong. They simply stopped making sense at a fundamental level. At life sign scanners picked up something stranger than a phantom crew. While Dante handed over a manifest listing 12 human crew members, the bioscans picked up traces of approximately 3,000 distinct neural patterns. None fully materialized on scans, flickering in and out of existence like badly tuned holograms. Oddest of all, the spectral crew signatures didn't just occupy the ship. Several appeared to be actively moving through solid bulkheads and sealed cargo holds, as if the freighter's interior dimensions existed in more than 3 spatial planes. Commander Thiene's security database offered 47 pre-programmed threat categories from quantum piracy to chrono-contraband smuggling. None accounted for a vessel that repeatedly defeated entropy itself. The Defiant Spirit's transponder code raised additional alarms, dating back to Earth's early interstellar period. The code structure hadn't been used in nearly 3 centuries, predating even the standardized docking protocols governing Omega Prime. Dante claimed it was an old family ship passed down through generations, which might have been plausible if not for the fresh battle damage that looked minutes old, despite matching weapons that hadn't existed when the transponder was issued. Armor pitting along the starboard side showed distinctive fractal scarring, consistent with weapons fire, except the scarring pattern changed every 30 seconds when observed under electron microscopes. One moment it displayed impacts from standard pulse cannons, the next it showed damage consistent with theoretical dark matter weaponry that existed only in military research labs. The ship's computer core, when accessed under protest, contained navigational logs referencing star systems that hadn't formed yet, according to current astrophysical models. "We get around," Dante said when pressed, wiping engine grease off his hands with a rag that, upon closer inspection, turned out to be a fragment of Atlantean silk, a fabric extinct for 12,000 years. His explanation didn't cover the radiation signatures saturating every inch of the vessel. The readings alternated between harmless background cosmic radiation and lethal levels of exotic particles that should have killed any organic matter aboard 5 times over. Stranger still, the deadly spikes only registered when no one was directly observing the readouts. Observatory equipment recorded the spikes perfectly, while live monitoring showed perfectly normal levels. Station AI designated the cargo bay as a conditional anomaly, whatever that meant. On paper, it contained standard agricultural equipment, tractor components, soil enhancers, seed vaults. Yet the quantum resonance scanners in Bay 47 began outputting nonsense data the moment the bay doors opened. Not just random noise, specific repeating sequences that several linguists identified as a distress call in a dead language no living scholar could fully translate. The deeper scans went, the more contradictions emerged. Thermal imaging showed the bay at absolute zero while motion sensors detected constant activity. Gravimetric sensors registered weightlessness despite the visible crates secured to the deck. Mass readings became an exercise in frustration. Each consecutive scan returned a different tonnage figure varying by as much as 3,000 metric tons. Not due to sensor error, the freighter's apparent mass actually changed whenever measured with no corresponding thrust adjustments or cargo movements to explain it. Chief Engineer Voss spent 4 hours trying to reconcile the readings before discovering his calculations had somehow inverted themselves in his personal datapad, solving impossible equations he hadn't even written down yet. The so-called agricultural tools raised additional flags. Several crates contained objects that visually appeared to be farming implements, but when handled, somehow cut through neutronium-reinforced inspection tables with no applied force. One particularly innocuous-looking soil sampler emitted gravitational pulses strong enough to briefly warp local space-time whenever powered on, yet weighed less than 2 kilograms on scales. Station quarantine protocols required scans of all organic material, except the scanning beams couldn't properly interact with the Defiant Spirit's seed vaults, instead producing holographic diagrams of theoretical quantum structures that made 3 physicists quit on the spot. By the 8th hour of docked operations, station security had quietly reassigned all personnel working near Docking Bay 47, after reports of personnel seeing double, losing time and, in one peculiar incident, temporarily speaking in extinct dialects with perfect fluency. The Defiant Spirit's mystery went beyond dangerous cargo or hidden compartments. Every system, every scan, every attempted inspection created new paradoxes where there should have been answers. Whatever scars Dante carried on his back, his ship clearly bore matching ones on its hull. The kind of marks left by surviving things no vessel should encounter once, let alone 6 separate times with no living witnesses. Medical Officer Yuki's bioscanner displayed warnings in a script that hadn't been used on Earth since before the first pyramids. The characters shimmered like quicksilver, rearranging themselves each time she tried to focus. Her translation software identified it as a proto-language precursor to all known human writing systems, something that shouldn't exist outside archaeological databases, let alone in a live medical diagnostic feed. Dante's scars weren't merely old wounds. They formed perfect fractal geometries across his back, interlocking patterns so precise they maintained nanometer-level accuracy across his entire torso. No battlefield, no accident, no torture device could produce such surgically exact markings. The patterns resembled circuit diagrams more than scar tissue, branching and reconnecting in ways that made the eye refuse to follow them for too long. Thermal imaging revealed the marks glowing at approximately 1200 degrees Celsius, roughly the surface temperature of lava. Yet Dante's skin remained untouched, the surrounding tissue showing no sign of heat transfer. When Yuki cautiously passed her hand over the glowing patterns, her glove's temperature readout showed ambient air. Temperature. The heat existed only for the scanners, not the physical world. Neural scans showed all of Dante's pain receptors firing at maximum capacity. By all rights, he should have been screaming. Instead, he hummed an old folk tune while reviewing cargo, manifests on his wrist display, occasionally commenting on station gossip. His pupils didn't dilate. His sweat glands didn't activate. The autonomic nervous system responses simply refused to acknowledge what the instruments clearly showed. The bioscanner's classification, Divine Defiance, didn't come from Omega Prime's medical database. A diagnostic trace revealed the term originated in archives older than the station itself, buried so deep even the AI couldn't identify their source. Attempts to access the full entry triggered a security lockout with an authorization signature that matched no known governing body in recorded history. Dante's DNA sequence contained anomalies that made geneticists cross-check their equipment. Entire chromosome segments matched no known species in the galactic registry, not just human variants, but nothing resembling any registered organic life form. Stranger still, these sequences changed configuration when observed, stabilizing only when genetic sequencing paused. The molecules behaved less like biological material and more like encrypted data responding to attempted decryption. The scars emitted subatomic particles unlike anything in standard physics models, When these particles interacted with Omega Prime's quantum computers, the machines began outputting infinite sequences of prime numbers. Not calculated primes. Mathematicians confirmed the numbers were being pulled from some external source at speeds exceeding computational possibility. The sequence always stopped abruptly at the number 47, regardless of calculation parameters. Medical drones attempting tissue samples experienced geometrically perfect failures. One malfunctioned so precisely its disintegration formed a perfect dodecahedron of scrap metal. Another folded itself into an origami swan mid-flight. A third simply inverted its gravitational polarity and stuck to the ceiling without damaging any systems. Each failure correlated exactly with proximity to specific scar patterns on Dante's back. Yuki noticed something the machines missed. Whenever Dante was asked about the scars, his pupils briefly mirrored their fractal patterns before returning to normal. The scars themselves pulsed faintly in response to certain frequencies from station equipment, particularly FTL comm arrays and quantum encryption nodes. She realized these weren't wounds at all. The patterns functioned like neural interfaces, but designed to connect with technology that either didn't exist yet or wasn't meant to interact with human biology. Standard biometric scans returned results, suggesting Dante was simultaneously 23 years old and approximately 17,000 years old. The readings alternated between these extremes, depending on which scar patterns were closest to the scanning sensors. Age progression algorithms failed spectacularly. Projections showed him simultaneously decaying into dust and growing younger at exponential rates. Yuki tried an experimental neurotransmitter scan and immediately regretted it. The readout displayed what appeared to be a perfect sphere of neural activity floating 2 meters behind Dante's physical head, connected to his brainstem by filaments of light that shouldn't have been visible to the scanners. The sphere contained what looked like cities, entire civilizations of flickering neuron clusters arranged in sprawling fractal metropolises. When she gasped, Dante casually mentioned she might want to delete that scan from her records before the station's AI saw it. The scars interacted with each other across distances. When Yuki marked one for biopsy, 3 others on different parts of his body spontaneously replicated the mark. Attempts to numb sections of the patterns caused corresponding sections elsewhere to glow brighter as if compensating. Mapping their connections revealed they functioned as a single distributed system rather than individual marks. Dante's mitochondria produced energy at rates that should have vaporized his cells, yet spectrographic analysis showed they weren't producing energy at all. They were tapping into existing energy from somewhere else. The power signature matched deep space readings of theoretical quantum vacuum fluctuations, the kind physicists speculated might fuel hypothetical perpetual motion machines. Standard allergy tests produced unexpected results. Dante's scars reacted violently to certain substances, not with histamines but by emitting gravitational waves. The reaction to common peanut proteins briefly created a localized gravity field strong enough to bend light around his forearm. His response to station-grade disinfectant made nearby objects massless for precisely 9 seconds. Yuki noted he had no reaction whatsoever to any known poison or toxin. The bioscanner's history log revealed a disturbing pattern. Every medical station that had ever scanned Dante's scars showed corrupted records afterward. Not erased, transformed. Earlier entries described procedures that hadn't been invented at the time, using equipment that matched no manufacturer specifications. Some logs referenced medical conditions that didn't exist in any diagnostic manual but sounded suspiciously like mythological afflictions from ancient Earth texts. Dante's galvanic skin response was a flat line, not because he lacked physiological reactions but because his skin conducted electricity perfectly in all directions simultaneously. The scars appeared to function as superconductors regardless of temperature, material, or electromagnetic conditions. When tested with high voltage, they didn't just conduct the current, they multiplied it somehow without any detectable energy source. The medical scanners detected temporal anomalies around the scar tissue. Clock measurements showed time passing, about 12% slower within 2 centimeters of the marks. Not consistently, the effect pulsed in sync with Omega Prime's rotation, suggesting the scars were somehow interacting with the station's spin gravity. Attempts to film this phenomenon resulted in footage where the scars appeared to move independently when played back, though they'd been motionless during actual observation. Yuki found the scars had perfect recall. When shown images from his own past, the patterns reconfigured slightly to match the time period in question. Scans from minutes earlier reappeared with subtly altered geometries, the changes somehow reflecting events that occurred after the scans were taken. The marks didn't just record information, they anticipated it. The medical AI eventually crashed trying to process all these contradictions, rebooting into safe mode with a single diagnostic message. Subject exceeds operational parameters. Yuki stared at the frozen screen, then at Dante's impassive face, realizing the terrible truth in the scanner's original warning. These weren't scars from surviving encounters with gods. They were trophies from winning. Medical Officer Yuki didn't so much discover what the architects were as remember it against her will. The vessel appeared in docking bay 47 without traversing space. One moment empty vacuum, the next an angular nightmare of crystalline spires jutting at impossible angles. No engines, no thrusters, just the quiet certainty of something that had always been there waiting for you to notice. Its first transmission began mid-conversation. "Will not tolerate further interference with the pruning cycle," said a voice like fractured glass grinding underfoot. The station's comm system logged 12 minutes of prior dialogue that hadn't actually occurred, complete with response timestamps from non-existent officers. Threat assessment protocols triggered automatically, displaying casualty projections showing Omega Prime's destruction with 100% certainty across all simulated outcomes. The figures updated in real time, not predicting the future but reporting. It has already determined fact. Station shields failed spectacularly in ways that made engineers question their understanding of physics. One emitter array shut down despite showing full power readings, its energy vanishing mid-circuit. Another kept operating normally while integrity scans confirmed it hadn't actually existed for 17 minutes. The chief security officer's famous last words were, "That's statistically very unlikely," just before his sidearm phased through his ribcage during a routine systems check. The architect envoy appeared on the command deck without using doors. Its form defied description not because it was horrifying, but because human optical nerves couldn't reliably process its angles. Crew members who stared too long didn't scream. They simply went cross-eyed and developed migraines lasting precisely 47 minutes. The thing spoke of eliminating the defiant one, with the clinical detachment of a botanist discussing invasive species. When Commander Thane demanded credentials, it unfolded a treaty signed in a script that burned itself into retinas upon viewing. Historians later identified 12 of the signatory civilizations, all extinct for millennia. Dante showed no surprise when the architect appeared. His scars pulsed in rhythmic patterns that made the air hum at frequencies just below human hearing. Security cameras captured strange interference whenever he and the envoy occupied the same frame, the architect's form skipping like damaged footage, occasionally being in two places at once before snapping back to singularity. Station AI noted, with some interest, that temporal anomalies around Dante exactly counterbalance those surrounding the architect, as if they were opposite poles of some cosmic magnet. The station's legal subsystem, normally a glorified bylaw encyclopedia, suddenly activated defense protocols no programmer had ever installed. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut in perfect synchronization with architect movements, not blocking them but forcing elaborate detours. Environmental systems redirected airflow to prevent the envoy from speaking in certain corridors without triggering official harassment statutes. When the architect attempted to access main engineering, 14 separate automated systems simultaneously cited obscure docking regulations requiring non-native biological entities to file visitation requests in triplicate. Dante spent the year crisis sitting calmly in medbay, observing protocol with eerie precision whenever station personnel were present. The moment he was alone, his scars flared bright enough to leave after images on security feeds. Recordings showed him mouthing words that didn't match any known language, each syllable causing faint distortions in the architect's form whenever it reappeared elsewhere on station. Medical sensors noted his body temperature fluctuating exactly 0.47 degrees with each pulse of the scars, a number that matched the architect's claimed pruning cycle duration in centuries. Young Ensign Rin made the mistake of directly addressing the envoy. "What exactly are you pruning us from?" she demanded. The architect's response came as a neural burst that left her unconscious for 9 minutes. Upon awakening, she recited the complete culinary history of a dead civilization in their native tongue before fainting again. The language matched one of the treaty signatures burned into her retinas. Engineers attempting to scan the architect vessel reported increasingly bizarre readings. Exterior sensors showed the ship massing approximately 2 kilograms, while gravitational scans indicated sufficient mass to form a singularity. Both readings were correct simultaneously. Attempts to measure its length produced results ranging from 3 meters to 11 light-years depending on which measurement system was used. The only consistency was its appearance in all scans as a perfect 3-dimensional projection of a 4-dimensional object, a shape that shouldn't have been comprehensible to human-designed equipment. Dante's scars began resonating in earnest when the architect breached Central Command. Each pulse now produced visible distortions in local gravity, not enough to affect objects, but sufficient to make light bend curiously around the patterns. Station AI logs later showed these distortions precisely matched the architect's own distortion signature, phase shifted by exactly 180 degrees. A cancellation wave. When security finally cornered the envoy near reactor control, Dante arrived without having walked there. Camera footage shows him stepping out of an elevator that hadn't moved in hours, his scars now glowing through his shirt. The architect reacted violently for the first time, its form fracturing into multiple iterations before collapsing back to singularity. "Defiance must be pruned," it intoned, the first complete sentence it had spoken since arrival. Dante smiled. "Article 14, subsection B of the Cosmic Governance Accords," he said. The station's legal AI immediately projected the relevant text, an obscure clause requiring all pruning requests to be filed during standard business hours in whatever system they originated. Omega Prime's chronometer stubbornly insisted it was currently 17:04 local time, 17 minutes past the station's bureaucratic day cycle. The architect froze. Its form stopped cycling through dimensions, settling into a single configuration that human eyes could finally perceive properly. It resembled an obsidian praying mantis fused with drafting compasses, every joint moving with geometric precision. Compliance was assumed based on previous pruning records, it said. The statement contained the first hint of something almost like hesitation. Dante's scars flared one last time as the station's legal AI autonomously filed 17,000 pages of injunction requests against the pruning order. Each form bore the precise calligraphic signature styles of dead civilizations the architects had previously eliminated. The envoy's parting transmission, logged at exactly 17:05 station time, consisted of 7 nanoseconds of pure mathematical outrage before both it and its ship disappeared, leaving behind nothing but an aftertaste of copper and 6 perfectly cubical holes in the docking bay radiation shielding. Commander Thine found Dante back in medbay 20 minutes later, humming while reading agricultural equipment manuals. His scars showed no visible activity. When pressed for explanation, he simply tapped the legal code projected above his bed, specifically a blinking footnote about appellate procedures for cosmic-scale judgments. The estimated processing time read 9,074 years pending review of new evidence. Yuki noticed 3 things when scanning him afterward. First, his DNA now registered as completely baseline human. Second, the station's medical database contained no record of ever classifying him as anything else. Third, and most disturbing, her own neural scans showed faint fractal scarring that hadn't been there yesterday, pulsing gently in sync with Omega Prime's rotation cycle. The Defiant Spirit's true manifest appeared across every screen in Omega Prime during the architect attack, scrolling too fast to read yet imprinting itself directly into short-term memory. Crews recalled exactly 3,127 names, though no 2 people remembered them in the same order, each belonging to civilizations officially classified as extinct. Historians later identified patterns, Selene mine singers wiped out during the First Dimensional War, the crystalline architects of Kessel 9, a dozen others whose names dissolved upon speaking them aloud. These passengers didn't occupy space normally. Security feeds showed them flickering between locations, a woman in agrarian overalls simultaneously mopping Deck 12 and repairing thruster couplings in Bay 47. Their identities shifted like poorly tuned quantum states, appearing as elderly, scholars to biometric scanners but agricultural technicians to visual observation. Only during moments of crisis did their true forms flicker through. Soldiers moving with muscle memory from battles fought centuries before their recorded birth dates, each bore faint scars mirroring Dante's. Where his back displayed elaborate fractals, theirs showed single geometric shapes, perfect hexagons behind left ears, glowing dodecahedrons along collarbones. Medical scans revealed the marks weren't implants, but biological adaptations, as if their DNA had rewritten itself to accommodate these quantum tattoos. When questioned, they claimed the scars came from harvesting accidents, though none could describe what crop they supposedly gathered. Their behavior patterns made no logistical sense. 3 would board a lift together and exit as 12. Meal. Logs showed them consuming precisely 47 calories per day, yet they worked 18-hour shifts without fatigue. They treated farming implements with the reverence of sacred weapons, methodically cleaning hydroponic spreaders that, upon close inspection, bore serial numbers matching decommissioned plasma rifles from 5 different militaries. Station archives became unreliable around them. Personnel files would list a refugee as Jarek, terraforming specialist, deceased 2147, before updating to display current biometrics. Security Chief Alden nearly arrested one for accessing restricted areas, until background checks revealed the man had supposedly served as Alden's academy instructor 40 years prior. The refugee in question appeared no older than 30. Their tools defied physics in pointedly mundane ways. A soil aerator left unattended in Cargo Bay 3 began emitting gravitational waves strong enough to bend light, yet when picked up, functioned perfectly as a simple garden tool. Grain silos registered negative mass on scales but remained immobile when pushed. One particularly unremarkable-looking watering can boiled liquid nitrogen upon contact, not by heating it, but by somehow removing the concept of absolute zero from localized spacetime. When architect boarding parties materialized, the refugees moved with coordinated precision no civilian crew should possess. They formed defensive perimeters using nothing but seed spreaders and irrigation hoses, until the devices unfolded into shimmering energy shields. Their scars began pulsing in unison, creating interference patterns that destabilized architect weaponry. Camera footage showed one elderly man catching a plasma bolt barehanded. His weathered fingers shimmered as if existing in multiple places at once. Dante referred to them as the harvested. The term made sense in context. These weren't survivors of pruning events, but rather the select few the architects had tried, and failed to completely erase. Each bore scars from surviving whatever cosmic mechanism deleted their civilizations. The marks functioned as quantum anchors, preserving fragments of otherwise obliterated timelines in their very cells. Forensic analysis of battle footage revealed chilling details. The elderly man disarming plasma bolts moved identically to a legendary Kesari war hero whose statue stood in the station's memorial hall. A woman redirecting architect energy beams used tactical footwork only taught at a secret military academy. Shut down 3 centuries prior, their agricultural tools emitted energy signatures matching weapon systems their cultures hadn't invented yet when they supposedly died. Automatic systems logged them differently depending on observation method. Visual scans registered simple farmers. Thermal imaging showed warriors in combat stances even when they appeared to be sleeping. Quantum resonance scans displayed something worse, flickering portraits of entire battlefield deployments as if each refugee contained the ghost of their civilization's entire military encoded in their scar tissue. The ship's cargo manifests told a disturbing story. Seemingly benign entries like fertilizer canisters corresponded architect attacks where those same chemicals had been weaponized against them. Irrigation modules, matched patented designs for quantum artillery platforms. Even the defiant spirits. Innocuous soil samples contained molecular structures identical to experimental cloaking tech from 7 different erased cultures. They referred to Dante by 16 different names, all translations of the same concept: the planter, the archivist, the one who remembers. Security intercepts captured whispered conversations in dead languages about the Great Filing and case number 047 Prime. The oldest-looking refugees treated him with a mix of reverence and pity, like veterans watching a decorated soldier shoulder an unwinnable war. Their true nature became clear during the Architect Envoy's final attack. As the crystalline entity prepared to breach the core, the refugees' scars synchronized into a single glowing network, not just across people, but through walls and equipment. The resulting energy wave didn't destroy the architect so much as confuse it into non-existence. Station logs captured the envoy screaming about impermissible precedent before vanishing mid-sentence. Post-battle analysis proved most disturbing. Biometric readings from the refugees matched historical records with impossible precision. One woman's neural patterns aligned exactly with those of Admiral Vera, commander of the lost 7th Fleet. Her retinal scans were identical, right down to the scar from a battle that hadn't occurred yet when Omega Prime was built. Another's DNA contained sequences that had only appeared in one place before, carved on fragments of the Kessel 9 ruins, remnants of a world erased before humans discovered fire. Dante surveyed the aftermath with unusual quiet. His scars pulsed faintly as refugees returned to their innocuous tasks, an elderly woman once again folding into the image of a simple gardener, though her hands still trembled with muscle memory from firing weapons that shouldn't exist. When pressed, he called them living appeals. Not soldiers, he insisted. Evidence. The station's quantum physicists eventually pieced together the horrific truth. These weren't survivors of pruning. They were walking, breathing legal arguments. Each scar contained the complete quantum signature of an erased civilization, not just their history but their potential futures. By preserving these fragments across the timeline, they formed the foundation of Dante's case against the architects. A case filed not with paperwork, but with existence itself. Security footage from the architect's defeat revealed one final detail. As the envoy disintegrated, every refugee's scar displayed the same mathematical sequence, 47 repeated in perfect sync. Later analysis proved it wasn't a number at all, but a compressed legal identifier matching the case number from Omega Prime's unexpectedly activated cosmic court protocols. The Harvested hadn't just fought back. They'd served subpoenas. Commander, Fen found Dante later watching his unusual crew repair the defiant spirit with tools that shouldn't function. The legal docket now listed them all as material witnesses, though no court in recorded history had jurisdiction. How many more are out there? Tane asked. Dante just smiled and patted a crate labeled fertilizer samples that rang with metallic echoes. The answer, like the refugees themselves, existed in quantum superposition, both devastatingly finite and terrifyingly infinite. Medical scans taken immediately after the battle showed subtle changes. The refugees' scars now glowed when near station equipment from certain eras. Some could suddenly speak languages they'd never heard before. A few even began displaying skills, advanced mathematics, tactical analysis, that matched their hidden military personas. It was as if defeating an architect had made them slightly more real. The station AI's final report contained an odd footnote. Based on new evidence, it had reassigned probability estimates for various historical events. Several civilizations previously considered extinct now showed non-zero survival chances. The math was peculiar. Each percentage point correlated exactly with how often refugees bearing their scars appeared together in security footage. The implications were clear. Every time the Harvested synchronized their efforts, somewhere in the quantum foam, an erased culture gained another slim chance at resurrection. Yuki noticed something the scanners missed. The refugees avoided looking at memorial walls, particularly those honoring lives lost in architect pruning events, not out of grief, out of recognition. She caught one elderly woman whispering names to a Kasari war monument, each matching casualties from a battle that hadn't happened. When confronted, the woman just smiled sadly and resumed mopping, her scar pulsing gently in time with the station's artificial day cycle. The Form 4479X wasn't particularly impressive to look at, just 7 pages of densely packed legal terminology with spaces for 17 different authorization stamps. Its official designation was Galactic Zoning Variance Request, Non-Standard Temporal Applications. Dante had 6 copies pre-filled in his coat pocket, each bearing slightly different phrasing to exploit jurisdictional ambiguities in the architect's own governance framework. The architect's legal authority depended on ancient treaties they assumed no one would challenge. These cosmic accords functioned more like physical laws than paperwork. Most civilizations simply accepted pruning as inevitable once the paperwork arrived. What they hadn't accounted for was humanity's particular genius for weaponizing red tape. 3 minutes after Dante filed the form, Omega Prime's legal AI suddenly activated dormant protocols that forced all architect vessels within 5 light-years to cease hostilities immediately, not out of mercy. Bureaucratic due process required it. Station lawyers found loopholes in governance codes older than Earth's solar system. Subsection 12, C47 of the Cosmic Administrative Procedures Act specified that any pruning order involving inhabited structures required an environmental impact statement. Another clause mandated public comment periods for any celestial-scale demolition project. Each regulation triggered automatic holds in the attack sequence, forcing architect ships into standby mode while their systems verified compliance. Their own efficiency became a liability. Perfect adherence to protocol meant they had to pause for every legal challenge. Dante hadn't been running cargo all these years. He'd been planting legal landmines. Every backwater spaceport, every minor customs inspection, every trivial shipping manifest contained carefully worded precedents that now surfaced in Omega Prime's database. A 3-century-old dispute over docking fees in the Rigel system established jurisdiction for collateral damage claims. Agricultural import forms from Altair Prime defined quantum refugees as legitimate residents under interplanetary tenant laws. Paperwork accumulated faster than the architects could prune it. The refugees' quantum-shifting identities made them bureaucratically bulletproof. Any attempt to serve official notices failed. Server drones couldn't track individuals who existed in multiple quantum states simultaneously. Court summonses returned as undeliverable. Recipient exists in 17 temporal states simultaneously. Eviction notices dissolved into static when scanned, their quantum ink destabilized by proximity to scar tissue. One particularly determined process server found himself running in circles for 6 hours before realizing he'd been chasing a refugee who only existed on Tuesdays. Architect warships began experiencing systemic failures when confronted with too many contradictory regulations. Their perfect adherence to cosmic law created cascading errors. One vessel spent 14 minutes caught between prune immediately commands and preserve for evidentiary review injunctions before its decision matrix crashed. Another ship started spinning uncontrollably when its navigation AI tried to simultaneously approach Omega Prime for demolition and avoid it per historical preservation statutes. The station's clerks became shock troops. Filing cabinets transformed into armories. Triplicate forms proving deadlier than photon torpedoes when wielded by trained bureaucrats. A junior records specialist halted an architect boarding party by serving them with 17 conflicting subpoenas simultaneously. The crystalline envoys froze like overloaded computers, each legal document introducing another recursive loop in their command protocols. One particularly vicious paralegal disabled an entire attack wing by proving their pruning license had expired in 17 jurisdictions simultaneously. Dante's strategy exploited a fundamental flaw in the architect's design. Their entire civilization functioned on absolute adherence to cosmic order, a system that broke catastrophically when faced with good old-fashioned administrative chaos. Every legal challenge forced them to pause, recalculate, and verify their authority, because to do otherwise would violate their own foundational laws. The more paperwork thrown at them, the slower they moved. One magistrate's signature bought 12 seconds. A properly filed appeal bought 3 hours. A class action lawsuit bought 6 months. Omega Prime's parking authority unexpectedly became the most powerful tactical division on board. Their automated system kept ticketing architect vessels for illegal parking, defined as occupying any space without proper permits. Each citation required the ships to rematerialize elsewhere, disrupting attack formations. When the architects tried fighting the tickets, the system automatically appealed to higher courts, locking their weapon systems until resolution. The enforcement drones turned out to be remarkably resilient against antimatter weaponry when protected by pending litigation force fields. The agricultural angle proved particularly effective. Dante had registered the Defiant Spirit as an interstellar crop transport vessel under the Galactic Food Security Act. This classified its refugee passengers as essential agricultural workers, granting them protections that even the architects couldn't override without triggering famine relief protocols. Attempts to prune them kept crashing against statutes protecting critical food supply chain personnel. The ship's fertilizer samples fell under agricultural inspection rules that took minimum processing times of 6 months per container. Stamps became weapons. Every officially notarized form carried slightly more legal weight in the cosmic balance than an architect's pruning order. The station's old-fashioned rubber stamps, normally decorative relics, turned out to emit specific quantum signatures recognized by governance protocols. One particularly determined clerk disabled an architect envoy by stamping its crystalline chest with "approved with conditions" in permanent ink. The markings disrupted its ability to phase through matter until properly appealed, a process estimated to take 9,000 years. Legal precedents from dead civilizations began resurrecting themselves. Court cases thought erased from existence reappeared in the system, each citing statutes the architects had to acknowledge. One landmark ruling from the lost Kesari Concord suddenly became active again when a refugee's scar pulsed near the station's legal database. It established that any entity claiming divine authority must first prove standing in a court of competent jurisdiction, a requirement the architects had conveniently overlooked for millennia. The clerks developed increasingly sophisticated tactics. One department figured out how to file simultaneous motions in 17 different temporal jurisdictions, forcing architect ships to process them linearly at normal speed. Another discovered that binding arbitration clauses in old shipping contracts could be invoked retroactively, pulling attack fleets into endless mediation sessions. The station's janitorial staff accidentally disabled an entire architect reconnaissance wing when their cleaning schedule was officially filed as a temporal preservation measure. Dante's ultimate play hinged on a technicality buried in the original Cosmic Accords. Article 47, Section B specified that any pruning stayed automatically while under administrative review, and crucially, didn't specify maximum processing times. The form he'd filed triggered a recursive loop. Each completed review stage automatically generated 3 more levels of appeal. The system estimated resolution would take approximately 10,000 years. Meanwhile, all pending pruning orders were officially on hold. The architects found themselves trapped by their own systems. Every attempt to bypass the legal obstacles triggered more fail-safes. Their ships couldn't violate rules they were programmed to uphold. One flagship spent 6 hours trapped in a holding pattern after being served with a temporary restraining order filed by a refugee who technically didn't exist in this timeline. Another kept receiving notifications to appear in small claims court over disputed pruning damages. Omega Prime security cameras captured the moment the architects realized their predicament. The crystal envoys stood frozen while legal documents materialized around them, each sheet covered in glowing sigils that anchored them to physical reality. The station's head clerk watched as one particularly stubborn subpoena stuck to an architect's chest like a glowing barnacle, preventing it from phasing through walls until properly responded to in triplicate. The Defiant Spirit's cargo manifest turned out to contain the deadliest weapon of all, properly filed exemption forms. Dante had spent centuries seeding the galaxy with carefully worded legal landmines disguised as shipping documentation. Every agricultural inspection certificate contained precedent-setting language. Each crew vaccination record established jurisdictional quirks. Together they formed an impenetrable web of bureaucracy even gods couldn't untangle. In the end, the architects didn't lose to weapons or armies. They were undone by 18 pounds of conflicting paperwork, 6 notarized affidavits, and 1 very determined paralegal with a rubber stamp. Their pruning order was officially stayed pending review, a review that, thanks to some creative interpretations of cosmic administrative law, would take longer to complete than the current age of the universe. Low-level clerks suddenly became the most dangerous beings in known space. The architects' weapons couldn't target them. Any attack on civil servants triggered immediate injunctions under interplanetary labor laws. One accountant disabled an entire architect vessel by e-filing their pruning notice as a disputed tax deduction. The ship's systems locked up trying to reconcile celestial destruction with proper depreciation schedules. Dante watched from the station's observation deck as the last architect ships warped away, not in defeat, but to file appeals in higher, cosmic courts. Their pruning beams remained fully operational but legally restrained. He patted the thick binder under his arm containing 17 more injunction requests ready to file. The scars on his back pulsed gently in rhythm with the station's legal AI processing new cases. Somewhere in the quantum foam, an obscure clerk's office began receiving paperwork in languages no one had spoken for millennia. Each form signed in perfect triplicate, each stamp carrying the weight of civilizations. A slow, meticulous rebellion waged not with weapons but with filing deadlines and properly completed fields. The architects would return, of course, but next time, they'd need to file Form 229F first, in duplicate, with 2 forms of identification. Dante peeled back his sleeve to show Yuki the oldest scar, a deceptively simple line just below his elbow. "These aren't battle wounds," he said. The mark started glowing under medical lights, revealing microscopic circuitry under its surface. Think of them more like vaccination scars. The distinction mattered. These weren't evidence of struggling against gods. They were proof of having survived them. Each scar contained encoded histories. When exposed to architect technology, Dante's oldest marks projected quantum imprints of dead civilizations, not just their final moments, but their complete potential futures. The Caesari Concord's luminescent cities flickered from his forearm, downloaded from a civilization the architects erased 12,000 years ago. The scanning equipment detected anomalies in the projections, tiny inconsistencies where hypothetical Caesari scientists kept making breakthroughs the architects hadn't anticipated. The Defiant Spirit's so-called agricultural tools turned out to be something far stranger. Genetic vaults labeled as seed banks contained quantum waveforms that reconfigured into cultural artifacts when activated. One fertilizer dispenser suddenly projected a complete Selene opera when accidentally left. Near an architect wreck, the irrigation controllers were actually resurrection protocols, each capable of reconstituting fragments of pruned civilizations from quantum foam, given enough legal precedent. Humanity's advantage was persistence, not strength. While other species developed faster than light travel or planet-cracking weapons, humans perfected bureaucratic systems that outlasted supernovae. Dante didn't overthrow cosmic order through revolution. He buried it under paperwork. His cargo manifests weren't shipping records. They were carefully constructed legal arguments masquerading as supply chain documentation. Every stop on Dante's route had planted evidence. That hydroponics seminar on Rigel 5, actually an appellate court session establishing local jurisdiction. The compost delivery to Altair III, a clever way to file preservation orders for its dying biosphere. Even the Defiant Spirit's frequent breakdowns were strategic. Each repair job left behind obscure legal citations engraved in replacement parts. The ion trail leading to Omega Prime contained more judicial precedents than actual particles. The architects couldn't comprehend this approach. Their minds functioned on absolute cosmic logic. They pruned entire species just to maintain clean universal equations. Paperwork was an alien concept. Legal filings short-circuited their decision. Matrices. One particularly well-worded injunction caused an architect warship to spin in circles for 9 hours while its AI debated whether, pending review, superseded immediate enforcement. Each form filed against them acted as an information bomb. That emergency restraining order wasn't just a legal document. It contained quantum interference patterns designed to destabilize architect computational matrices. The copies for defendant always trailed off into chaotic waveforms that looked like nonsense to human eyes, but crashed higher dimensional processors. Dante's favorite trick was embedding recursive legal paradoxes in printer firmware. The refugees weren't passengers at all. They were living exhibits in a cosmic trial. Each survivor's scar contained empirical evidence of civilizations that should have been erased entirely. Their shifting quantum states made them impossible to completely remove from the timeline, like blurry afterimages the architects kept trying to delete but couldn't fully remove. Every time the harvested synchronized their scars, they reconstituted more fragments of their lost homes. Dante's ultimate weapon wasn't some superweapon, it was case number 47X, a celestial appeal filed in every jurisdiction simultaneously. The case wove together thousands of minor disputes and contradictory rulings into an unbreakable web. Every agricultural inspection report, every lost cargo claim, every trivial transit fee dispute added another thread. The case wasn't meant to win, just to tangle the architects in so much red tape they couldn't move. The soil samples told the real story. Each container held quantum-locked cultural fragments from erased societies. When scanned near architecture, technology, they expanded into full courtroom exhibits, murals from lost cities, equations from dead physicists, plays from forgotten playwrights. One particularly potent sample contained the complete genetic library of a civilization that had nearly developed temporal shielding before pruning. Human persistence manifested in unexpected ways. While other species built megastructures, we perfected systems that outlasted them. That mundane-looking water pump in Bay 17, its warranty documentation contained appellate procedures that took architects 4 centuries to process. The Defiant Spirits coffee maker ran on case law, its heating elements activated by proximity to filed motions. Dante didn't carry weapons. He carried enough paperwork to smother gods. Every scar on his back functioned as a registry. The oldest ones resembled ancient Earth vaccination marks, circular patterns containing cross-hatched filing codes. Newer ones pulsed with quantum signatures from more recently protected cultures. Together they formed a living database of civilizations the architects had failed to completely erase. Medical scans showed each mark constantly updating itself with new precedents from across the galaxy. The agricultural fiction served multiple purposes. Farming equipment fell under obscure but powerful interstellar trade protections. Seeds qualified for biodiversity preservation statutes. Even the refugees' cover as migrant workers gave them protections under galactic labor laws. This careful positioning meant any architect attempt to prune them required wading through endless agricultural regulations first, by which time the legal challenges were already filed. Humanity's true weapon was inconsistency. While architect logic demanded clean, predictable universal rules, human systems thrived on contradictions. Our legal codes had so many loopholes they essentially formed quantum foam in document form. Dante exploited this beautifully. A properly filed zoning variance application could derail an entire pruning operation simply because the paperwork didn't fit the architect's pristine concept of order. The Defiant Spirits drive engines told an interesting story. Their energy signatures matched no known propulsion system because they weren't just engines. They were mobile filing offices. Each warp jump left behind carefully calibrated quantum affidavits anchored to spacetime itself. These floating legal landmines awaited activation whenever architects passed through. One particularly vicious clause caused their ships to briefly materialize during key historic moments, forcing retroactive continuity reviews. Routine agricultural inspections became revolutionary acts. Every time Dante submitted his ship for mandatory seed purity checks, he was actually filing preservation orders. The harmless-looking seed analyzers were designed to detect architect tampering with planetary ecosystems. Their reports automatically triggered planetary quarantine protocols that blocked pruning efforts for decades. The refugees' scars pulsed in sync with legal proceedings. Whenever a new case was filed in their favor, markings across the group would glow slightly brighter. Medical scans showed their DNA rearranging itself in response to courtroom victories, each favorable ruling literally rewriting their genetic code to be more resistant to pruning. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were evolving into something the architects couldn't delete. Dante's final maneuver didn't involve weapons or grand speeches. He simply filed Form 47X9B with Omega Prime's clerk, an unassuming agricultural subsidy request that happened to contain precedent from 17 erased civilizations. The form automatically triggered a full celestial audit of all architect pruning activities, requiring them to justify every extinction event with proper documentation. The estimated completion time was 10,000 years. The agricultural ruse hid its true purpose until the end. Those soil enrichment tablets were actually quantum archive nodes. Each tablet contained the complete cultural record of a dead civilization in dormant state, waiting for legal reactivation. The defiant spirit wasn't carrying crops. It was transporting whole societies compacted into crystalline data. When finally, activated by the right combination of legal victories, they would blossom into full historical records admissible in cosmic court. Humanity's rebellion grew from strange soil. While other species built monuments, we perfected stubborn systems that kept functioning long after they should have failed. Dante's scars weren't decorations. They were filing cabinets. His cargo wasn't supplies, it was evidence. The defiant spirit wasn't a freighter. It was a mobile courtroom preserving civilizations through loopholes and fine print. The architects never saw it coming. They expected fleets and superweapons, not zoning variance applications and agricultural inspection reports. They pruned entire stars but couldn't handle quadratic forms in triplicate. Their perfectly ordered universe collapsed under the weight of our messy persistence. Omega Prime's legal computer finally finished analyzing the case files. Its conclusion was telling. The architects hadn't been defeated, just tied up in so many bureaucratic knots they'd effectively been neutralized. Their pruning beams still worked perfectly. They just couldn't legally aim them anymore. The rebellion hadn't won. It had postponed indefinitely. Dante watched starlight glint off the defiant spirit's scratched hull. Behind him, the refugees, scars pulsed gently in unison, 3,000 living case numbers awaiting their final hearing. Somewhere in the quantum foam, entire civilizations hung in the balance, their fates resting on proper citations and filing deadlines. The war wasn't over. The paperwork simply hadn't finished processing yet. The architects called their retreat temporary operational realignment. In practice, it looked like 3 warships simultaneously experiencing critical existence failure while trying to process conflicting zoning ordinances. Their fatal flaw was meticulous adherence to their own systems. Every form filed against them wasn't just paperwork. It was malware wrapped in triplicate. Operation Divine Intervention turned out to be incredibly simple. Whenever an architect vessel received legal documentation, it couldn't reconcile with existing cosmic statutes. Its perfectionist protocols forced it to recalculate its entire operational matrix. Filing 17 contradictory motions at once caused their decision engines to overheat. One particularly verbose land use petition made an entire battle group implode into fractal geometry mid-jump. The refugees' quantum states created jurisdictional nightmares. Attempting to legally classify beings who existed in multiple timelines simultaneously crashed architect census protocols. One tax assessment form caused an envoy to duplicate itself endlessly, until 47 identical copies were arguing over who owed back taxes on a shipment of grain that both did and didn't exist. The more paperwork the station generated, more the architect's flawless systems became their undoing. Each defeated architect vessel set precedent. When one warship got trapped in an endless loop processing environmental impact statements, it automatically became case law that applied to all others. Pretty soon, every pruning operation had to account for theoretical damage to hypothetical ecosystems. One clever clerk realized that by classifying cosmic background radiation as a protected historical artifact, they could force architects to conduct full archaeological surveys before firing weapons. Dante's scars pulsed brighter with each victory. Medical scans revealed they weren't just markings, they were recording devices. Each time an architect ship withdrew, New intricate patterns etched themselves into his skin like celestial court transcripts. The oldest scars now glowed with the complete legal codes of 12 extinct civilizations, ready to be reactivated at a moment's notice. Yuki noticed the newest marks resembled Omega Prime's own bureaucratic stamps. The station's legal AI developed alarming initiative. It began autonomously citing architect vessels for building code violations. Their crystalline structures didn't meet standardized occupancy requirements. One warship received 17,000 citations for improper waste disposal after venting plasma near a theoretical wildlife preserve. The citations carried no fines, just mandatory court appearances that the architect's systems couldn't ignore. Architect envoys found themselves imprisoned by their own protocols. Attempting to phase through administrative holding cells triggered paradox alerts that froze them mid-materialization. One got stuck for 6 hours between dimensions because it hadn't properly signed a release form. The more they struggled, the more violations they accrued, creating endless loops of bureaucratic entrapment. Humanity didn't win so much as outlast. While other species built doomsday weapons, we perfected filing systems that turned cosmic law into quicksand. The architects could prune civilizations, but they couldn't handle improperly notarized affidavits. Their ships could withstand supernovae, but crumpled before zoning variance hearings. The galaxy's new rule was simple. Even gods had to show their work. No more pruning without impact studies. No more wiping civilizations without public comment. Periods. Every act of cosmic intervention now required proper documentation in 17 duplicate forms, a system so cumbersome even immortals couldn't bypass it. Architect vessels began suffering what clerks euphemistically called catastrophic existence failure. In reality, their perfect systems simply couldn't reconcile human stubbornness with cosmic law. One warship attempting to enforce a pruning order suddenly found itself listed as a historical landmark mid-battle. Its own weapons wouldn't fire at a protected cultural site. Another got stuck in an infinite loop reviewing parking violations from 3 centuries ago. The refugees quickly adapted to their new role as living evidence. Their quantum-shifting abilities made them ideal plaintiffs, able to file identical lawsuits in multiple jurisdictions simultaneously. One particularly resourceful refugee served court papers in 17 timelines at once, forcing an architect envoy to appear before courts that didn't technically exist yet. Omega Prime's clerks evolved into frontline soldiers. They developed sophisticated tactics, filing motions in extinct languages, exploiting temporal loopholes in ancient treaties, ceding legal precedents by dropping paperwork near quantum anomalies. One paralegal disabled an entire architect fleet by proving they hadn't properly renewed their celestial demolition licenses. The station's environmental systems turned unexpectedly lethal. By classifying architect vessels as industrial equipment, they could impose strict emission standards the crystalline ships couldn't meet. One warship had to power down its energy core after failing an impromptu pollution inspection. The air quality tests required didn't exist when the ship was built, but that didn't matter. Regulations applied retroactively. Architect technology couldn't comprehend human persistence. Their perfect machines expected worlds to accept pruning as inevitable. Instead, they encountered beings who would appeal parking tickets across 17 dimensions. Their pristine logic had no defense against good old-fashioned bureaucratic stubbornness. The Defiant Spirit's cargo manifests now functioned as legal textbooks. Every line item contained precedents that made architect systems stutter. That fertilizer shipment actually defined pruned civilizations as protected endangered species. The soil moisture sensors established strict evidentiary standards for planetary destruction. Dante had seeded the galaxy with legal landmines disguised as farming supplies. Humanity's greatest innovation wasn't technology. It was paperwork that outlasted stars. While other races built megastructures, we perfected filing systems that persisted across cosmic resets. The architects could erase civilizations, but our forms kept coming back, like weeds growing through sidewalk cracks. Dante's final stroke was diabolically simple. He registered Omega Prime as a sacred historical site, right before an architect attack. Their weapons automatically powered down, Divine mandates prohibited damaging venerated locations. The station's freshly painted, protected cultural heritage plaque gleamed as the warships reluctantly withdrew. The refugees' scars now pulsed in sync with legal filings. Each new case made them incrementally more real, their quantum signatures stabilizing with every precedent set. Drifters became witnesses, ghosts became plaintiffs. The harvested were no longer remnants. They were evidence withstanding. Architect attempts to bypass the system consistently backfired. One envoy tried destroying paperwork rather than processing it, only to trigger ancient anti-tampering statutes that froze its systems until the year 12,642. Another inexplicably found itself filling out parking permits for a vehicle it didn't own, because someone had filed paperwork listing it as the registered operator. The station's janitorial staff accidentally created a perfect trap. Their routine cleaning logs classified architect wreckage as hazardous materials requiring special disposal procedures. This triggered environmental regulations that forced the architects to clean up their own damaged ships by hand and in triplicate before leaving the system. Each defeated architect vessel set precedent. When one warship got trapped in an endless loop processing environmental impact statements, it automatically became case law that applied to all others. Pretty soon, every pruning operation had to account for theoretical damage to hypothetical ecosystems. One clever clerk realized that by classifying cosmic background radiation as a protected historical artifact, they could force architects to conduct full archaeological surveys before firing weapons. Dante's scars pulsed brighter with each victory. Medical scans revealed they weren't just markings, they were recording devices. Each time an architect ship withdrew, new intricate patterns etched themselves into his skin like celestial court transcripts. The oldest scars now glowed with the complete legal codes of 12 extinct civilizations, ready to be reactivated at a moment's notice. Yuki noticed the newest marks resembled Omega Prime's own bureaucratic stamps. The station's legal AI developed alarming initiative. It began autonomously citing architect vessels for building code violations. Their crystalline structures didn't meet standardized occupancy requirements. One warship received 17,000 citations for improper waste disposal after venting plasma near a theoretical wildlife preserve. The citations carried no fines, just mandatory court appearances that the architect's systems couldn't ignore. Architect envoys found themselves imprisoned by their own protocols. Attempting to phase through administrative holding cells triggered paradox alerts that froze them mid-materialization. One got stuck for 6 hours between dimensions because it hadn't properly signed a release form. The more they struggled, the more violations they accrued, creating endless loops of bureaucratic entrapment. Humanity didn't win so much as outlast. While other species built doomsday weapons, we perfected filing systems that turned cosmic law into quicksand. The architects could prune civilizations, but they couldn't handle improperly notarized affidavits. Their ships could withstand supernovae but crumpled before zoning variance hearings. The galaxy's new rule was simple. Even gods had to show their work. No more pruning without impact studies. No more wiping civilizations without public comment. Periods. Every act of cosmic intervention now required proper documentation in 17 duplicate forms, a system so cumbersome even immortals couldn't bypass it. Architect vessels began suffering what clerks euphemistically called catastrophic existence failure. In reality, their perfect system simply couldn't reconcile human stubbornness with cosmic law. One warship attempting to enforce a pruning order suddenly found itself listed as a historical landmark mid-battle. Its own weapons wouldn't fire at a protected cultural site. Another got stuck in an infinite loop reviewing parking violations from 3 centuries ago. The refugees quickly adapted to their new role as living evidence. Their quantum-shifting abilities made them ideal plaintiffs, able to file identical lawsuits in multiple jurisdictions simultaneously. One particularly resourceful refugee served court papers in 17 timelines at once, forcing an architect envoy to appear before courts that didn't technically exist yet. Omega Prime's clerks evolved into frontline soldiers. They developed sophisticated tactics, filing motions in extinct languages, exploiting temporal loopholes in ancient treaties, ceding legal precedents by dropping paperwork near quantum anomalies. One paralegal disabled an entire architect fleet by proving they hadn't properly renewed their celestial demolition licenses. The station's environmental systems turned unexpectedly lethal. By classifying architect vessels as industrial equipment, they could impose strict emission standards the crystalline ships couldn't meet. One warship had to power down its energy core after failing an impromptu pollution inspection. The air quality tests required didn't exist when the ship was built, but that didn't matter. Regulations applied retroactively. Architect technology couldn't comprehend human persistence. Their perfect machines expected worlds to accept pruning as inevitable. Instead, they encountered beings who would appeal parking tickets across 17 dimensions. Their pristine logic had no defense against good old-fashioned bureaucratic stubbornness. The Defiant Spirit's cargo manifest now functioned as legal textbooks. Every line item contained precedents that made architect systems stutter. That fertilizer shipment actually defined pruned civilizations as protected endangered species. The soil moisture sensors established strict evidentiary standards for planetary destruction. Dante had seeded the galaxy with legal landmines disguised as farming supplies. Humanity's greatest innovation wasn't technology. It was paperwork that outlasted stars. While other races built megastructures, we perfected filing systems that persisted across cosmic resets. The architects could erase civilizations, but our forms kept coming back, like weeds growing through sidewalk cracks. Dante's final stroke was diabolically simple. He registered Omega Prime as a sacred historical site right before an architect attack. Their weapons automatically powered down. Divine mandates prohibited damaging venerated locations. The station's freshly painted, protected cultural heritage plaque gleamed as the warships reluctantly withdrew. The refugees' scars now pulsed in sync with legal filings. Each new case made them incrementally more real, their quantum signatures stabilizing with every precedent set. Drifters became witnesses. Ghosts became plaintiffs. The harvested were no longer remnants. They were evidence withstanding. Architect attempts to bypass the system consistently backfired. One envoy tried destroying paperwork rather than processing it, only to trigger ancient anti-tampering statutes that froze its systems until the year 12,542. Another inexplicably found itself filling out parking permits for a vehicle it didn't own because someone had filed paperwork listing it as the registered operator. The station's janitorial staff accidentally created a perfect trap. Their routine cleaning logs classified architect wreckage as hazardous materials requiring special disposal procedures. This triggered environmental regulations that forced the architects to clean up their own damaged ships by hand and in triplicate before leaving the system. Battle tactics shifted from lasers to loopholes. Instead of targeting engines, clerks filed motions challenging the structural integrity of warship hulls. Rather than boarding parties, they sent notaries public with preservation orders. The architects found themselves pinned down not by artillery, but by endless requests for documentation. Dante sat in the station's legal archives watching new precedents unfold. His scars now glowed constantly. Each pulse another civilization added to the cosmic record. The architects hadn't been destroyed. They'd just been slow-walked into obsolescence through proper channels. Omega Prime became the galaxy's most heavily fortified courthouse. Its docking bays were retrofitted with filing cabinets instead of torpedo launchers. The armory contained rubber stamps and notary seals. Even its structural reinforcements were built not for withstanding attacks, but for surviving endless rounds of litigation. The architect's final transmission was telling. Not a declaration of war, an appeal for an extension on paperwork deadlines. Their pristine order had collapsed under our chaotic persistence. They could prune stars, but they couldn't defeat a species that weaponized bureaucracy. The refugees planted gardens in the station's hydroponic bays. Their tools still occasionally unfolded into improbable shapes when architect signatures were detected. The fertilizer samples now served as evidence lockers. Even the Defiant Spirit's battered hull bore fresh markings. Not scars, but docket numbers, each representing a case still pending. Humanity's victory wasn't flashy. No grand speeches, no final battles. Just the quiet certainty of knowing we'd out-paperworked gods. The architects would be back eventually, but next time, they'd need to file their forms properly first. Dante inspected the latest batch of agricultural inspection forms before departure. They looked routine enough. Seed purity certifications, equipment sterilization logs. Buried in the footnotes were 6 new legal precedents and 1 very creative reinterpretation of interstellar zoning laws. He sealed the crate carefully. The harvest would continue. The paperwork never ended. Somewhere in the quantum foam, an architect warship shuddered mid-jump as another incorrectly filed motion triggered its paradox safeties. The weapon that finally defeated them looked suspiciously like a standard issue clipboard. The galaxy's new guardians didn't carry guns, they carried stamps, and they weren't afraid to use them. Omega Prime's clerks returned to their desks as if nothing had happened. The battle was won, not with a bang, but with a perfectly filed injunction. Outside the viewports, the stars shone a little brighter, each, one now protected by 17 layers of bureaucratic red tape. The architects hadn't been destroyed, just indefinitely delayed pending further review. The scars would fade in time. The files would remain. The galaxy's new rulers didn't sit on thrones, they manned filing cabinets. Gods could still prune civilizations. But now they had to show their work first, in triplicate, with 2 forms of ID. The scars faded. The files remained. Omega Prime's corridors hummed with new purpose, its docking bays converted to filing annexes, its weapons replaced with notary terminals. The architect's crystalline debris now decorated clerk offices as cautionary trophies. Station engineers marveled at how easily God-killing paperwork fit into standard storage cabinets. Dante loaded the last crate onto the defiant spirit. His sleeves hid fading marks that had once glowed with dead civilizations. Next time, he told Commander Thene, tossing a thick manual onto the cargo ramp, read the fine print. The spine read, Galactic Administrative Code, Balliner 47. Somewhere, in the quantum dark, celestial filing cabinets clicked shut. The architects would return. But first, Form 229F, in duplicate.